Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well and keeping safe. Very important. Uh, since I am audible, I guess, to all of you, let me start with whatever I have to say. A small little brief about myself before I have to start. Thank you very much to the Proto team for giving me this opportunity to deliver this content that I have with uh, people that I know, people that I do not know, wonderful, wonderful audience, so to speak. So I will start to share the slides and then slowly start talking about what I have to say. So kindly let me know if the presentation is visible. So my name is Professor Shaunak. I am a professor, assistant professor of management and marketing studies at the Department of Commerce and Management Studies at Xavier's College. And I've been teaching for the last 3-4 years in this college. Around, it's been 4 years now. And I associate myself more with the lines of research on marketing, branding, consumer behavior. These are the areas that fascinate me a lot. So when I was thinking about the situation, it always fascinates me to think about what are the marketing lessons that we can learn about from this new normal that we're exposed to today. What are the branding lessons we can derive experiences from today in the current situation. And that has led to this little talk that I wanted to have with you people with regard to marketing and branding, new opportunities in the new normal. So that's what we have decided to go ahead with the theme of this presentation. So as long as the world has not found a cure or a vaccine for this COVID-19, as we call it, we may have to adjust to a new normal, which implies that we have to resort to a new way of leading our lives, living our lives, work, our interactions with other people. Please bear in mind that we may have to live in the new normal for a very long time. Many diseases caused by the viruses today, probably has no cure as such. Not even the common cold, if you think about it that way. There is no one sure shot cure to the common cold, although this being the word common being associated with it. So there are no vaccines for many viruses either. So, but we have learned to adapt our lifestyles to deal with them, to live with them. So you look at the HIV virus, for example. It's been there around since the 1980s, I think the late 1970s, maybe, and possibly even before then. I may be wrong. So it's not as widespread as what we are experiencing today. But we have still not found out a vaccine for the HIV virus. We have let's say, retroviral drugs, that can control the disease, but it cannot cure it. But unlike the HIV, COVID-19 is much more contagious, it's much more infectious, and it's not really associated with a specific lifestyle, as we are already aware of. Therefore, our levels of adaptation and the changes maybe that we have in our lives is much more higher. These adaptations and changes are considered to be what is called this new normal of leading our lives. So this new normal is what we're going to deal with at most. So I like to start off, it's the fact that it's a very crazy time for all of us. It's something that we have not planned. We did not anticipate this. We did not prepare for this. It's something that's very new to most of us. But what I want to start off with is the note that you need to take care of yourselves and your family. But this is not just my message for you. It's also for the marketer in you. It's also for the marketers to communicate this message to their target customers. And I'll deal with this message eventually when I move to the upcoming slides as well, that this message becomes probably the fulcrum of what we have today. So I haven't been to a movie in, let's say, over 6 months now. It's been a long time that I've been to a vacation. I've been distanced from my friends, let's say my extended family, my colleagues, my students. It's really a tumultuous world, as we call it, the hurly-burly out there. It's really a very difficult time. So this is not a drill. We are all living through this global pandemic. We are all sharing the same story. This word is important, the word story. I'll talk about this in depth. While the world is seeing pandemics eating lives, let's say, mercilessly, more new viral outbreaks happening in China, eroding a fragment, let's say, explosions eroding a fragment of an entire city, forest fires, this, that. It's really a torrid time right now. But the irony is that, we have an Arogya Setu app, which tells us that we're probably all fine and doing great probably. Now, this is regardless of whether you are new to the industry, whether you are an influential person. Future generations are definitely going to talk about you, about me, about us, and read about us in the textbooks. So what are the things you cannot control? What are the things that you have limited control over? You have limited control over the virus. You don't have control over the news. You don't have control over schools, colleges, universities, education institutions closing down. You don't have control to governmental reactions and responses. You cannot control the IPL from happening in Dubai, although you might say that you can control the World Cup from happening, of course, the Cricket World Cup from happening. But the IPL is something you cannot control. You cannot control the world, the moon, the stars, and so many other things. But what can you control? Since you cannot control the following, since you cannot control them, it's better that you not fixate on what you cannot control, but rather on your moods. You can control your reactions to something, your responses towards something. You can control your attitudes, your favorable attitudes or dispositions towards something, whether it be favorable or unfavorable, either or. Your decisions that you're taking, those are important. So it's important that you make those decisions very good and impactful. That's important. Now, let's have a look at this. Okay, I think it's, let me just clear out a few things. It's 7:11, although while I say it, I realize how ironical I might sound. It's 7:11 right now, the time, and we are going to end by 8 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present for the first 45, 50 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes, maybe we can have a small, the last 10 minutes, we can have a small Q&A, because I want to interact with you as well. I do not want to make this a total monologue for this. I think that should be fine with the rest of you as well. Okay, so that's basically the ground rule that I wanted to establish in the beginning. Okay, so no firm can effectively predict what the new normal shall be, but it can surely be among the first to find out what the new reality is going to look like. That is effective, and that's possible. Now, see, in the beginning of, let's say around March, when this so-called lockdown started to happen and started to, take place, we were expecting, as people, we were expecting a V-shaped recovery, after the downturn. That there's going to be quick rebounds of the economic activity, of various kinds of economic activity. So it's like a V-shaped curve, and basically we're going to have to face this for, let's say, around 3 to 4 months at most. So that's what we're all hoping. But now, since it's happening a little bit longer, people are wondering, people are worrying about whether this is going to look like an L-shaped curve, an L-shaped recession. So meaning, is there a very slow, it is very true that there is a very slow recovery that's going to happen after we hit bottom, after we hit rock bottom. But the problem is that it results or triggers a kind of an unusual situation that gives birth to uncertainty in between. And that's exactly the world that we're dealing in right now, that we're living in right now. So I personally believe that it's almost like, these situations, allow me to elaborate on why I believe this is a different kind of uncertainty. So I believe it's, if you look at business science, we can compartmentalize the uncertainty into 3 different mannerisms, or 3 different ways, as shown by these cylindrical urns, which you can see in the slides. The first urn, as you can see, is a transparent urn. And remember your basics of probability that you studied in college or in school. And when a blindfolded person would pick up a ball from this urn, you can actually see what this particular person's chances are. What is the probability that the person will pick up, let's say, a white ball? And it's obvious, it's 25%. So if this were a normal recession, you would have a kind of estimation based on past recessions. We've had, I think, around 11 recessions so far till the Second World War. If I may be wrong about the exact number of recessions, but approximately, I think, around 11 recessions we've had so far. And we make an estimate on how long this is going to take. But I'm not sure if we can do that right now with the current pandemic and the current recession that's going to boil up very soon, and probably something that we've already been exposed to. Maybe it's much more of a second type of distribution that's you can see in the black one, where we cannot see or predict that much. We can probably only slowly get ideas as we figuratively pick up balls from the second urn, which implies that slowly we inform ourselves with how things are going to look like on, let's say, a month-to-month basis, or maybe on a weekly basis. So slowly we get to know what the recession is going to pan out like. This is basically what we call in data science or in business science as knowable distribution. We know the probability from before. And however, we can start to think of the COVID uncertainty. This is, of course, the third case I'm referring to, as much more of an unknowable distribution. So everything that comes out, everything that we experience from, let's say, very different sets of variables. We do not know whether the vaccine, what the vaccine is, number one. We do not know when the vaccine is going to come out. We do not know what are the commodity prices going to look like. We do not know how this online digital experience that we are having right now, how long is this going to last? And how strong is this going to look like? So how are they going to react disturbances in global supply chain, let's say the online behavior, as I was talking about. So there's a lot of uncertainty that we are faced with today. I think it's the nature of this recession that is very similar to the second one, but the fact that we do not have any answer right now. That's probably the uniqueness about the third situation. So there is a temptation for companies to briskly react and not respond. This is a marketing lesson. Mind you, companies tend to react and not respond to a situation, which means we did not plan for this. We had a lot of talks about business planning, continuity, business continuity planning, about how we should, make these matrices as marketing matrices as strong as possible, as data, centric as possible, as accurate as possible. But none of us can respond to a situation. We are basically reacting to a given situation, and that's the, let's say, the irony of situations or irony of facts, or maybe the ground reality. So firms must, in this context, stay informed, number one, and they must, of course, make smart marketing decisions, which is pillowed on data. Because right now, markets are based on customer experiences, customer knowledge, customer insights, customer feedback. So that's basically how companies are thriving on right now. That's exactly what is the fodder for these companies. So that is essential for us to keep track of. So is, let's say, financial relief available? So there's a saying, there's a small research, and this is not just for the small biz website that I've quoted. This is a common fact that can be seen in multiple places. That over, let's say, half the small businesses, over 50% of small businesses, do not have adequate cash liquidity to survive for more than 28 days without revenue, and they cannot grow with reduced revenue. So in this context, we can, of course, when you talk about cash buffer days, you're actually referring to, let's say, in this context, we talk about cash buffer days as well. We talk about the number of days, let's say, cash outflows of a company. It could, let's say, pay out of its cash balance. And should its of course, its inflows have to stop because of this. So once its inflows stop, so how long can the company last? How long can the company subsist? That is exactly what we are referring to. So these are some of the governmental measures we can talk about. We can talk about them being collateral free. We can talk about, these are some of the governmental initiatives, by the way. So there are collateral free loans that are provided to MSMEs, 1 year principal repayment, moratorium. The moratorium period is, of course, being extended. The interest rates have been capped off. We've seen the guarantee fee that has been taken by the central government being waived off as well. So a lot of benefits are provided. So if you ask me, I believe this is more like, this will act like initial seed money for those small enterprises which are hit by, let's say, zero cash flow due to the national lockdown, which was there in the past. This loan will actually help them buy, let's say, new raw materials. It could help them pay initial bills that they have, the daily wages that they have, for their employees. So in short, this will be like working capital for cranking up their businesses once again. But this is something that we all know. So banks, although right now they're flush with funds, they have been unwilling, significantly unwilling to lend to this category of borrowers, as the fear that the money will not be repaid. And that's just something that we already know about. So these small businesses have also pledged, pledged all their assets already for other loans and do not have any more assets to pledge. So it is to break this so-called logjam that the government has said that it will backstop bank loans and banks up to, let's say, 3 lakh crore rupees, and said that these loans will not require any kind of collateral. Right, so banks are now expected to be more comfortable. Of course, the word expect is very important out here. They're expected to be more comfortable in assisting this category of borrowers in this context, especially because the risk now becomes practically zero, especially because their loans are now guaranteed by the central government. So if you were to talk about, come to this context of marketing right now, a little bit more than what we were discussing, some of the cues, how I've basically structured it is because it's an informal and an asynchronous kind of a link between the slides. So there's a logical connection, of course, but I have not systematized this in the form of, let's say, strategy number 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's more like a story that I'm going to narrate, which is going to be ineffective maybe for some of you or for all of you. So as business operations, transform, especially for smaller firms, the key is, of course, and very important, to keep their customers informed wherever they search for them. So it's important that you start leveraging the digital once again. I'll talk about the digital once again in the later half, but it's important that we leverage the digital at least at the moment. So what are the ways you have? You can create a post. Let's say you have Google My Business. These are opportunities for a small business I'm talking about. You don't have to talk about, let's say, the Tatas and the Birlas and the Ambanis, the Reliance Jios all the time to speak about marketing. You can get down to, let's say, a small cola manufacturer or a soda manufacturer on the street, about how he or she can leverage his business all the time. So these are some of the techniques I talk about as a marketer. As a marketer, it's not just about the creme de la creme in the market, it's also about the grassroots. That's also important, the bottom of the pyramid. So, in Google My Business, maybe you can create a post for your searchers to ensure that, you're still operational, maybe, or maybe you're open, and highlight any changes that should, that they should anticipate. Your customers should anticipate to your business during the pandemic. Use social media handles like Facebook, social, in Instagram, you have Twitter, etc. Use them. Post something to your audiences on a timely manner. Connect with them, right? So ensure to them that you're still open again, doing business online, or maybe taking orders, future orders. Update your contact hours if necessary. That is very important, because customers want to know how long are you operating, what is the timing of your operations. All these things are important. And then use a multitude of these ad campaigns from time to time. So update your locational, extensions. Use geographic targeting, right? So update everything. Let's say, use this concept called day parting, as it's used in advertising. Advertising use this term called day parting, whereby you can divide the broadcast day into several parts, for which a specific TV program or maybe an advertisement is, which is relevant to that set period, is aired. So this can be used to reflect your new business hours, if you look at it that way. So update your ads to reflect local inventory, your services. So you're not only spending money to, let's say, reach out to people when they're contacting you. It sounds very silly, of course, but simply stating the fact that you're open during the pandemic, or you're operating in any kind of capacity, let's say, right, during the pandemic, it simply gives an assurance to the people that they will go through and they will click on your website and make that conversion. If they know, this has to be important, if they know that that's going to be fulfilled maybe for them in a timely manner, rather than consuming them weeks or months down the road. That's important. So this is applicable for airline companies. This is applicable for online services, online businesses, where they rely too much on taking the customer for granted, and it's almost like a reliance that happens. So this is something that they need to work upon. I want to focus a little bit more on Google My Business, because this is something that's available to everyone, and it's something that they can leverage quite effectively, right? So when you talk about Google My Business, there are three things that it has implications for, and I'm going to talk about this. So you talk about industry performance, which keeps on metamorphosing, it keeps on transforming widely during the pandemic, and it's not just not all industries, of course, are experiencing very poor results. Some are seeing performance shifting, but they're not suffering really. Let's have a look at some of those industries maybe which are seeing good amount of growth, let's say mixed amount of growth, or maybe poor kind of growth with regard to Google performance. So this is basically a kind of snapshot that you can think about, that you can talk about when you talk about those companies, or those not companies, industries or sectors which are finding good implications from Google search, from Google My Business. You can talk about NGOs, non-profits, charities. You can talk about health and medical. You can talk about business management, finance, etc. Right? These are the things. You can talk about the media for all that you'd want. You can talk about digital, various kinds of media, not just television and not just this. You can talk about Netflix, about how it's taken the world by rage right now. And now Netflix is not a new phenomenon, but right now I think this is now the time to speak about these kinds of platforms more than ever before. There are companies, there are sectors which have been enjoying a mixed kind of a growth, mixed kind of a success, you might say. And these are, let's say, real estate companies which provide, let's say, home decor or interior decorations, home upgradations, like, let's say, wall repair and etc., plumbing services to a certain extent, maybe automotive sector, retail sector. These have enjoyed limited kind of let's say benefits from Google search, from Google My Business. And the other part is, of course, the companies, the sectors which have experienced very poor and shoddy kind of a success. And that's basically got to do with travel and tourism, travel, hospitality. And this is not something that I need to explain why. We all know the answers. It's got to do with bars, restaurants, anything that has got to do with physical contact of people. So it's got to do with live entertainment. It's got to do with sports and fitness. Although many gyms across the country have been started to reopen, but still. So these are some of the cases where we've seen limited amounts of success and failure, right? So businesses in this context, I personally believe that they must always stay agile. This is a very, very important, term that we need. The key is to stay agile. So, all the businesses are experiencing different impacts due to the pandemic. And that's obvious. So think about how you as a marketer can adjust to these new marketing conditions, to these new market conditions, in terms of how, let's say, of your services, or how you're meeting customer demands in this particular market. So you need to keep on thinking about this. As an example, take this case in point. This is the case of Tent Craft. So it's a company where, where they convert, it's basically a company that provides tents, customized tents for, let's say, for a wedding, or for an event, or for a conference, or whatever you name it as. So now what they've done is, they have, with the pandemic coming into the picture, they have converted these pop-up tents for medical purposes. So this is what they're doing right now. So these tents, which were earlier used for a wedding, let's say, they have now converted their entire business model. They've decided to stay agile. I cannot close my eyes and say, look, the pandemic has hit us, I have no business model right now to look into. So this is what they're doing: sanitizing, screening. It's a huge opportunity, by the way. So if you're, as a marketer, if you can connect with one of these healthcare companies right now, I think your brand equity will shoot off the charts. So this is the best time to look into this perspective. So you need to basically not just keep. It's not just about how you or your company or business can stay afloat and reduce operations, but what are the new opportunities that you can think of right now in your business to pivot towards needs that exist within this particular market, let's say, right? So this is important. Is there an opportunity with to partner with the healthcare organization at present? That's another important question, right? In the Indian context, however, the situation has been very, very dismal. We have seen so many opportunities coming and going. We've seen opportunities for private enterprises to tie up with these, let's say, disinfection tunnels. They could have easily tied up and partnered with these disinfection channels, thereby providing them with two things. One is an advertising platform. But now is the time when these companies tend to think about cost minimization. And that is exactly where they're going in the wrong direction. We'll talk about this a little bit of depth eventually, right? So people's behavior, I think someone needs to unmute themselves, I guess. Okay, I guess someone is unmuted. You need to mute yourself. So people's behavior will change. And you talk about brands, implications for brands, and you talk about implications for consumers. So when you talk about implications for brands, these are some of the cues. These are something that we already know about, some things that we already are aware of. Just give me a minute. Yeah, something that we're already aware of. So we need to preserve money and stop opening of new outlets on a temporary basis, at least at the moment. This is something that we need to look into. We need to reduce our marketing budgets to acquire, let's say, new customers. And of course, let's say we need to come up with these creative campaigns from time to time to ensure continuity in business growth. So these are things that we already know about, right? That's quite common. So we need to bring down costs. We need to focus more on reaching out to people, etc. Now, how are consumers thinking about this? So you need to save, this is from a consumer's point of view. Consumers will want on the extreme opposite. They want to save as much money as possible. And they want to bargain extensively right now. They want the best possible value at the lowest possible cost. They would prefer, to go with those brands that they are familiar with. And probably now is the time when they would be much more brand loyal than than they could be ever. So this is the time to reward that. This is the time to reward that kind of brand loyalty. You may request whoever it is to kindly unmute themselves. I guess one of you has your mic on. Right? All right. So the other part, of course, is about reduced impulse shopping with more preferences. So it's very important that you keep track of these aspects. Number one, you need to keep in touch with your customers. Remind them that you're there. Continually remind them that you're there. And these are good reasons for you to return to the next purchase, for them to return to your next purchase. Don't underestimate the power of your existing customers as... Just give me a second, please. I guess one of you is unmuted for some reason. The admin, if you can kindly help me out with regard to this, can you help unmute everyone? Can you mute everyone? Yeah, thank you. Okay. I'm continuing to share my slides once again. I hope they're visible. So when you're talking about customers, you do not underestimate the power of your existing consumers or customers as an acquisition channel. Uh, Keep encouraging them to act as advocates, as promoters for your firm. That's important right now. This is the biggest takeaway that you can probably think about, because mind you, now is the time to reward that loyalty for customers. That's the biggest takeaway that I can provide to you, right? So as a marketing professional, as a marketeer, let's say. Now, this is something that's interesting. Businesses must take action to navigate the present, the now, as we call it, plan for the recovery and shape the future. There are three terms that I'd like to talk about here. The first one is what I call wholesale Darwinism. I'd like to speak about this in the context of, let's say, luxury brands. This is a very good case in point. So even before the pandemic struck, independent luxury goods wholesalers in India, many of them are very small businesses. Some of them are family-owned businesses. Not all of them are, large-scale commercial ventures. Some of them are boutiques. So some of these luxury departmental stores in India were already struggling, and that's interesting. They were struggling in part, because luxury brands moving to vertical integrations for over the past, let's say, 2 decades and more, have more recently started experiencing this kind of e-commerce growth, right? So they've been taking the shift towards e-commerce growth. So the pandemic at the present moment might actually might force them to go out of business. Now, this damage could extend to brands, let's say, which have not fully transitioned to these vertically integrated distribution models, as well as, let's say, upstart brands which need to wholesale, need to use these wholesale channels to reach out to new customers and to finance the development of their full collections. So to come out of this crisis maybe and to survive, wholesalers can adopt these aggressive commercial and discount policies, right? So which, at least at the present term, this is like the irony of fate. So this could hurt the positioning of these luxury brands, because you're giving out discounts at something that doesn't go with their image. So this is a big problem. The second one is what I call hyperpolarization in performance, or hyperpolarized performance. So here you're talking about things. You go back before the crisis, and it makes a little sense to talk about, let's say, a business sector in which in terms of averages. You never spoke about any industry in terms of its average or its mean value, because the growth rates and profit margins were so widely spread out, right? So even with the same segment, even with the same price points, various brands growth aimed at, let's say, I'm giving random numbers, let's say 40% to 50% or negative percentages. We expect further polarization based on three strict fundamentals. And let me name out. Then the one of them can definitely be the health of the brand's balance sheet, which is, of course, prior to the crisis. That's the idea that you want to have, that idea that you want to share with your target audiences, that image that you want to share with your target audiences. Second is the resilience of that operating model. This includes, let's say, digital capacity. This includes, let's say, the agility that you have for your supply chain, the dependence on various kinds of wholesale channels, etc. And third and most important, how are you responding to COVID-19, the situation right now? So these three fundamentals, I think, are important in bringing about this polarization, this hyperpolarization that we're experiencing right now. And the third one is what you call the ownership experience cycle. Whatever be the nature of the service, be it hotels, resorts, let's say cruises, restaurants, the idea of building these experiences around brands has been one of the most dynamic and fast growing components of the service sector, right? So if you talk about millennials, millennials typically tend to be those people born, I think, after 1980s, till late 1980s maybe. There are various definitions that exist. So, they opted for more of experiences. And let's say those Instagrammable moments, as you call them, rather than buying brands. Here, of course, I am referring to those specific genres of brands. If you are buying, let's say, a pack of salt, then I doubt whether an Instagrammable moment would really be, possible at all or not. But if you consider, let's say, the baby boomer generation, baby boomers are people who are way old. Let's say people born in the 1950s or a little bit before that. So they are moving in this direction, that has already, they have already accumulated several kinds of brands over the years. They've been acquainted to several kinds of brands. They've seen the journey. So while we expect this positive kind of momentum of experiential marketing to persist, it will slow down in the short term. As you know, the interesting part is consumers will temporarily and more naturally revert to the buying conditions that they had earlier. So this is the new normal, as I keep talking about. This is a temporary phenomenon. So is this a short-term blip? That is a bigger question that we are asking. So consumers prefer, whether it be business consumers or rather industrial consumers, they prefer trusted sources for purchase-related recommendations. In the B2C sector, see what's common between them. 90% of the responses, this is according to BCG Matrix research, BCG research, not Matrix, BCG research, um, where they, for consumers, ordinary consumers like you and me, people tend to trust consumers and companies which they are aware of. People tend to trust people they are familiar with, and thereby trust those brands which they're using. So it's about word of mouth. It's about those, let's say, that advocate that you are, proving to be. That influencer marketing really comes into the picture in a big way right now. You see the comparison with the B2B space. You see the comparison with the industrial space. Again, it relies more on friends and colleagues. See, that's a major 53% we're talking about. So the common link is what? People around us. So despite the fact that we have so much of social distancing, etc., I personally do not personally agree with this word for social distancing. I will believe it's better to call it a physical distancing rather than social distancing, because now is the time to connect with each other even more than probably ever before, right? So this is the point. I spoke about digital a while back, but right now I'm going to concretize this. It's important that we put digital in the center of your operations, right? So, let's take this as an example. I'm going to speak about this very briefly. Do not want to get into too many facts and all, but just have a look at the e-commerce profiles of these consumers, in terms of age. This is a case in China. Let's keep all anti-Chinese sentiments at bay right now for the time being, and look at this situation from a business point of view. If you look at it very carefully, see the top end. If you look at the age group above 31, there has been a perpetual increase by around 2 to 3 percentage points in terms of usage of e-commerce platforms. So these are the platforms, these are the age groups that have been using this much more. Now see the interesting or the ironical situation. The age group below 31, let's say around 25 to 30, 19 to 24, below 18, except below 8 to 18. This is the age group which would typically associate with using digital, using online, let's say, products and services, online buying behavior. This has seen a reduction in, let's say, your usage profiles. From 24%, it's gone down to 16, from 18 to 13 percentage points. That's a clear reduction. If you compare this with, let's say, in terms of online consumption, this is what has happened interestingly. So again, there's been a reduction in the lower end. So, purchase of products, let's say, above 1,000 yuan, that's a Chinese currency. And see the highest one, there's been an increase in percentage points for all those consumption materials or the purchases that have been below 200 yuan. That's an interesting insight that we can actually derive from what happened before the pandemic period and what happened right during the pandemic period. The data, of course, is for a 3-month period, 3 months in the sense from January to March, and from March all the way to May. So that's how this calculation has actually been done by BCG. So one thing that I would like to basically focus upon once again, is not to tamper with marketing spends. This sounds ridiculous. It sounds like I'm putting out a very theoretical lesson right now, but it's actually true. These are lessons that we all know as marketers. One lesson that I can give out right now, based out of experience or knowledge, whatever it is, that we should not, as marketers, it is important that we do not cut down marketing budgets right now. It sounds ridiculous. I know it sounds very easy for me to say this in a theoretical discussion like this, but it's important. I'll tell you exactly why. And the second is, of course, not do price promotions aggressively right now. Price promotions are important. They should be done, but aggressive price promotions. Let's talk about this one by one. So you talk about what? You talk about the first one. I'll explain what this SOV is and what is this market share. So it's expected that firms, do not deduct too much of their marketing spends and costs in the long term, because by doing so, they run this risk of lowering their share of voice as compared to, let's say, their competitors. Share of voice is basically when you are talking about how your customers, how your audiences are reacting, how much are they talking about you, right? So it's a measure of your brand owns as compared to your competitors, right? That's important. So it's a great gauge of brand visibility. In this recessionary period, it's important that you maintain your share of voice. That's what SOV stands for. It's critical for growth right now. So the more you talk about your brands right now, the better it is, because now is the time to make a lasting impact in the mind of the consumer. Especially because after the downturn is over, this will get stuck to the mind of the consumer. That reinforcement happens. And the second one is, do not do aggressive price promotions. Probably I should have written the word aggressive out here, but when you can raise the price of goods, it's please do it then, not now. Because there's a wider group of consumers who are very price sensitive in a downturn. So it's important that you engage with price promotions only when it's feasible for your firm, not otherwise. However, remember that price promotions are actually a temporary phenomenon, and you'll end up disappointing a lot of people, a lot of consumers, when you have to raise back your prices once again at the regular level. And you have to raise up your prices because you do not want to be that firm which is responsible for starting a price war in the middle of a pandemic. That's the last thing that you'd want right now. And we must also remember that this so-called one-stop-all marketing is not really a solution in today's situation. It's useless, and it is not going to result in ROI. So I would recommend that that money be spent on donations and philanthropy in other cases, in from a company's perspective. So today, marketing is not really about telling your consumers that, look, this is what I do, this is what my company is all about, but instead telling your consumers that you actually care for them, right? So the best form of marketing right now, I would say, is the customer care department, or maybe your operations team, or maybe the spokesperson who continually deals with your customers and their let's say the end users. So let them know that you're trying to do your best to fight it out. Let's say apologize to them for the delay due to the stringent lockdowns. Own up to it. That's important. Owning up to it is important. Be authentic at the end of the day. That's very important. It's very important that you do not pretend to say something for the sake of it, but you're authentic, genuine on what you do. Do not blame others. Do not blame the situation all the time. Do not put up those fake stories, right, about being what to say, accountable for something because of an external situation. So the locus of control needs to be more with the company, internal. So it's about brutally being authentic. So that's the only piece of marketing that's going to work today. That has been working in the past, and that's going to work tomorrow. So this is basically the CEO and founder of Zoom. The reason I want to mention this, again, keeping all anti-Chinese sentiments at bay right now, is from a business perspective about how Eric Yuan, who's the CEO of Zoom, is so brutally humble. If you've seen some of these interviews and videos of Eric Yuan, you'll find how he is so humble in the face of adversity. That's very interesting because his business revenues today are out of the charts. It's blowing all records probably, because all the retweets he's getting is not because of the fact that Zoom is now a private, public listed company and it's growing, massively across the world. But it's because this guy is still willing to learn. He's willing to put himself out there, and he's willing to do things that is going to make his company grow, make himself grow, more importantly. And that is what I'm saying. Do not tamper with marketing spends. Now is the time to connect with people more than ever. And this is where I basically come towards the fag end of our discussion. This is probably one of the last mantras I can talk about. It's important that you share stories. All brands tell stories. All brands talk about content generation. So I think today, content and storytelling is probably the best investment, marketing investment in the present situation, so that you can stay afloat or relevant in business. The word afloat is probably not relevant. So content should be, I'll come back to this corner house example. So content should not be a part of the DNA of the company without any timestamp. I'm not putting a timestamp on this, but not just for the pandemic, but forever. So do not tell your companies or consumers that they're a company that sells soap. Do not tell them this. Instead, tell them things that's going to make them believe that you genuinely care about them. That's important. Those keywords that you're selling out. So that is important. If you're an Ayurvedic company, highlight those key phrases that you want to communicate to them. So help people know about what's consistently. That's how you build content, right? So do it as a matter of discipline and not just for the sake of a pandemic. Then it looks pretty much synthetic and artificial. So I have heard a lot of people talking about Corona House, especially those who are from Bangalore. I'm pretty sure some of you may be from Bangalore right now. So this death by chocolate is something that is a running message that I keep coming across in Facebook and some of these social media handles. And so these guys, this is a very interesting case study. So these guys did a small bite on what the owner of Corner House is doing right now. So what is it that Corner House is doing right now? So what's going on in their minds? In the minds of the CEO, because they're shut down right now. Everything is closed, and maybe they've done deliveries probably through Swiggy and Zomato and whatnot. But would you like to hear their story? That's important. What have they done so far? When was the last time where they faced a similar kind of a crisis? How did they get out of it? Right. So it's just simple stories that you're interacting with people. It can be through a webinar, it can be a YouTube video, it can be a simple blog or a newsletter, for all that you care. But it basically binds people together, building a strong network of people together, right? So it's about not telling people that that we are the best, that look, this is my company and look, I'm the best. But it's rather more simply about, here is something to fill up your time, because it's lockdown period, mind you, that is the time I'm referring to. Fill up the mind space that you have, and something that you basically appreciate, right? So this surpasses anything probably that money can buy, right? So getting creative with your storytelling when the world is paused is probably the only mantra to success at the moment, because honestly speaking, there is no time like now to find a new way to communicate with your customers for you to stay relevant. So brands and organizations are a lot like people. So because they're built and run by people, that's probably the reason why this is, not really an artificial entity, so to speak, in the truest sense. So just like probably work from home, wherein people are flocking online to share stories about their new lives, their workstations, maybe their cup of dalgona coffee that they've brewed, freshly brewed at home. Maybe brands need to evaluate their own COVID-19 stories in the same way. So how they have been affected, that's the key. And what are they doing to respond to this right now? That's important. And what and how can they add value in this lockdown mode, or maybe in this pandemic situation right now? So that's important. I'll give you an example. This is the case of Starbucks. Starbucks very recently, not so recent though, they have decided to give these, they have decided to offer free therapy to all its workers, all its employees. And they've expanded their mental health benefits to include in-person, what to say, in-person interviews and video chats if required, in video chat sessions. So I thought this was quite impressive, actually. It's not just about customers all the time. So sometimes it's about these guys helping build uh, a strong employer brand. That's also important in the branding story. It's not just about customers. It's also about your employees, taking care of them, understanding what they require. So Starbucks said it would begin to offer, let's say, I think around 20 free therapy sessions to all its employees. And that this included its part-time employees also, by the way. So as a part of its broader mental health benefit. So when we talk about Starbucks, we do not really associate mental health and psychology and counseling as a part of the story. We deal with them as a coffee brand and a coffee chain, a global coffee brand, etc. But this is where they get to tell their story. This is where they get to define their company. Right? So this move could actually make coffee chains, their coffee chains, one of the most sought after, one of the most high profile employers of, let's say, RD service workers, to give significant benefits to those mental, health professionals or workers. So as I was talking about, storytelling is the key. So the stories brand tell during the pandemic will inevitably outlive the virus, and it is obvious, right? So brands need to tell these stories that honor the present moment, and while also considering how these stories that they inform and alter the perceptions of people. That's important. You need to change the perceptions of people, of their organizations in the post-pandemic paradigm. So why would you be investing in this storytelling? You'd be investing in it because it binds people together. It helps you connect with them. So I believe the situation is like an intermission right now, where you do not really care about it that much. You really wait for when the movie is going to resume once again. So right now we are in this kind of intermission where that's important. It gives you that kind of a breathing space. And this is the time you need to redefine your story. And that's probably the reason why we're waiting for this intermission point, this point of time, to be more important than ever before. So just to sum up, this is basically where I wind up and open up the room for further discussions on more questions. Just to sum up, so as long as the world has not found out, let's say, a cure to the COVID-19, or maybe a vaccine for this COVID-19 situation, we have to keep dealing with this. This is probably the new normal that we have to get exposed to. So if you talk about all these companies in India that are doing business right now, so you think about any company, whether it be in the airline segment, or whether it be in the FMCG segment, or in the let's say, consumer durables market, they are still focused on one thing, and that's price promotions, and that's how to get in short-term customers, on a short-term basis. So they're not really thinking long-term. So you think about, let's say, airline companies right now, all that they bothered about is probably when the lockdown is going to get over. When the situation is going to improve, and they're going to start off with their fleet in a normal manner, and then they're going to start off with the price war, probably. So this is not really the time that we're going to talk about it. Now is the time to probably think about improving your brand personality. That's important. How do you refine your brand personality? Redefine that identity that you have. Redefine that identity to include concept. I'll stop sharing the slides because I've basically done with them. Just go back to the titles slide. Yeah. So now is basically the time when you need to talk about, let's say, things like, how can I introduce care as a core component of my business, as a core component from an aggressive strategy that I have, as an aggressive personality that I have? How do I convert myself to the core component that is care, of genuine care for others, honesty? These are terms that we need to think about. So this is the personality that I think brands need to be focused upon right now. And the shape that they give it right now, I think is going to go a long way in redefining this. So with that note, I'd like to wind up whatever I had to discuss and wanted to share with you maybe. And I'd like to open up the floor to questions that you'd like to ask me maybe, and I'll try my level best to attempt and answer them. Thank you very much for your patient listening, first of all.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, hi, sir. Very informative session, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Sir, I had to ask something, sir. I read somewhere that these are times for marketers where you can have the length of ad can be more and there can be more storytelling because there's less of content available online because there are no daily soaps. Netflix is like people have consumed almost all the films and stuff. So do you agree with this that the length of the storytelling or the length of the ad can be increased now? Uh, it's
Mm,
something that-
I can say yes, but my answer is not going to have any kind of impact on what the actual situation is, because the governments have taken, not just central government, state governments have taken a clear-cut cue into the ad space. That's
yeah,
something that's happened in a big time. So from that perspective, if you ask me, I would say that companies, even if they want to, cannot increase their ad timings. And now speaking about the more practical point, from a more practical situation, even if you increase the timings of a specific advertisement, you break your ad into multiple parts. You consume more ad spots in a given day, more in a prime time spot. It's fantastic. It's going to be perfect. Right now there's a meme that's doing all the rounds. With this what to say? Not a meme or a video that's doing all the rounds with the in the TV soap, where someone has made a music video out of it. It sounds very and looks very funny. And what's interesting happened is because of this meme, people are searching for that serial, that Hindi soap. And because of this, what's going to happen simultaneously from an advertiser's point of view, it's going to spice up that advertising slot. So it's going to raise up slots over there, demand for that. But if you talk about from a purely advertising point of view, it's not really about the timing. It's not also true that there is no shortage of content. I mean, there is a lot of content available. It's about just communicating, about sharing those stories, because right now people are more emotional rather than rational. So if you just talk to people, hit the right emotions, I think your job is done. It works like magic.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, so
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can I ask you a question, please?
go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Lakshay. I'm a student of IIM Raipur 2020 batch. I would
Okay.
like to like you to answer the question related to the marketing of variables, like the gadget variable, like the Google Lens, Google Glasses, and we have smartwatches. What about marketing in those areas?
Google Glasses right now, I don't think really is something that even Google is worried about. That's a straight cut. But when you talk about smartwatches, I do see a lot of investments happening out here. By investments, I mean advertisements. A wrong usage of the term I made. Probably more advertisements. So if I were to just upgrade your point to add in one more product, I think the answer fits in perfectly. When you're talking about, let's say, those wireless earphones or wireless, what are those called? Earbuds, probably. So now you will see more than ever a huge demand for these kinds of products. Now, if you come back to the story, if you come back to, let's say, a smartwatch, now is probably not the time to really market it. But I can give you a real good case in point. There's this application called Step Set Co. So there's this application that helps you keep track of this. What you do, your movements, it's a pedometer, so to speak. So this particular application, what it does, it ties up with a lot of these companies like smartwatch companies, and let's say there's this application called a product called Track. It's basically, we sit for long hours in front of computers, and we get very there are health issues that might crop up because of this. And because of this, what happens is, because of the tie-up that they've done, now you get to get these products at a discounted price. But that's a discount I'm talking about. If you talk about it from an information point of view, this company which sells, let's say, smartwatches, I think right now is the time when you need to reposition your business, rejuvenate your business, reposition itself, and focus on, let's say, health. So again, boil down your answers, everything to connect it to health. I think it will sell like anything, because there's no dearth of online shopping today. It works perfectly right now. So I think it's just about the reposition, connect the mindset of people to health. And if you sell, I think right now is the best time where anything related to health will sell. Anything and everything, I mean. When you take up a small, let's say, a small common cold capsule that you have, and you tell people that, look, this is the capsule that I've developed that helps you get rid of the pandemic, this virus, I'm pretty sure no matter what the price that I charge, people are going to come out and buy this. So that's a mind game that I'm playing, of course. But at the same time, the cue is this, that you connect your answers and you connect your cues to health. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Good evening, Shashank here.
Good evening. Yeah.
Yeah. So before asking my question, I actually have a point to go forward with Gaurav's question that he asked at the very beginning regarding the length of the advertisement. Considering the studies that have been going, that the attention span of people have been reducing with the trends of TikTok and Instagram stories and Snapchat. Do we think rather than continuing the length, like extending the length of the advertisement, what should we do is the increase the frequency of the advertisement, maybe in a short story basis or be a continuing story for 5 days. This story will continue, the second part will continue in the second, like after a phased manner. Because if we are talking about the attention span, people are getting bored in some time, because it is reaching. If it has to be viral, it will be viral in a week. And when we are talking about seeing people, okay, I have seen this meme last day. No one is interested in seeing that. People will just shift it. What are your views on that?
See, for the timing, let me say again, just to connect with Gaurav's point that he mentioned some time back, it's not really about increasing either the time frame of a single advertisement, or it's really not about increasing the frequency. Well, if you increase the frequency, kudos to you, because it depends on how you're doing this. You find YouTube advertisements, I think right now there's been a sudden spike in number of YouTube advertisements, more than we have seen earlier. So, earlier when you click on let's say a video that you want to see, earlier probably there was one advertisement, now there are two advertisements, so I had one of two. So that's not really the frequency I'm referring to out here, but because of this increase in number of advertisements, people will find it difficult to accept it. What is what is probably much more relevant is built in the form of a story, like you mentioned. But if I ask you, Shashank, how many advertisements have you really come across in the last, I think, forget about the pandemic, forget about this situation that we're right now, how many advertisements have we come across in the last, let's say, 2 years or 3 years, where they've actually developed a storyline based on an advertisement or based on a product? Very few. And the reason, of course, because of a much more technical reason more than anything else, it has basically got to do with ASCII, that is the Advertising Council. So the Advertising Council really doesn't have the right kind of framework, I would say, the right kind of, let's say, the mechanism for companies to really come ahead and book their slots in advance. So it's basically about vying for that one spot. That is how extremely competitive the segment is. And now that the competition has reduced to a certain extent, the frequency pattern still doesn't come in, because the other slots are booked in by the governments, the governmental posters and various other information cues. So whether you talk about reach, whether you talk about frequency, or whether you talk about simply extending the time frame of a single advertisement, I think neither of these will work as long as you're not connecting with the audiences in terms of, let's say, engaging content. People will listen to you when you have that content. Otherwise, they're not in the picture. That's, I think, the essence.
So now continuing to my question, I might be debating a bit off topic. So there are two parts. First, the very cliched question of work from home. Now, seeing this drift, like people are deviating from, like, especially for IT companies really won't want to block an office space for the same work that an employee can do sitting on his or her home. Maybe the model can change, that they have to be more productive, or what is continuing right now. I'm also working and I have my deadlines to fix and all. So how do you see this going forward? Because to the extent I remember, Twitter and Google employees have been given some benefits of a lifetime work from home and etc.
Yeah, I think Microsoft is one of the first companies to have started this, and then Google picked it up eventually. And it's correct that these are, when you talk about these kinds of setups, when you provide, let's say, work for, let's say, 4 days a week or 3 days a week, it's probably only the Googles and the Microsofts and the Teslas that you can think about. But it's not just about these companies. It's also about the small companies, the multitude of these small businesses that are operating right now. So for them, work from home may not be a feasible solution all the time. I understand. See, you cannot replace the physical with the virtual. That's not possible. Education is a sector where it's possible. But I'll give you an example, our own example. There are a few professors in the panel as well, as I can see. right now we've started with online classes, or those of you who have already been doing online classes, it's like the normal economic curve that you see, diminishing marginal utility. Initially it sounds fantastic, work from home is extremely convenient for you, I'm pretty sure it's the case with you as well, but over time you'll start to see that this has declining utility. You don't find the right kind of value, because number one, that social connect is not there, and you cannot treat us like machines, you cannot treat people to be machines. So there is definitely going to be that social connect that you'll be craving for, and the moment you start craving for the social connect, and automatically that decline in work from home, the productivity levels will start to happen. I can assure you that within the next, I think, 3 to 4 months, till by the end of this year, if the current situation continues to happen, I can assure you that your productivity levels are not going to increase. It's going to either remain stable or it's going to decline. And the reason is we are not going to be extremely happy with what we're doing. That's quite obvious. So I think that is basically how I look at on work from home from the multitude of companies. Of course, many companies cannot really afford this. There are many of my friends who are working in the field of sales, etc. They have to go outside, despite battling the lockdown and everything. They have to go outside and they have to do their business, of course. But other companies which can afford it, which can really make the best use of it, I think will be using it. But there needs to be a hybrid model in the future. So I'm looking at a future, let's say around March, next year, March or maybe April. I may be completely wrong. I really hope this is in the month of December that the situation improves. But I'm really looking at a hybrid model in the future. So it's a combination of, let's say, 3 days of work from home plus 4 days of physical workspace. So I think that builds up productivity levels. That's
Great.
Basically my answer. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. If I'm not taking much time.
Sir, good
Yeah, please,
evening.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Okay, I think there was a issue with network or something.
Sir, I just missed a small question actually. So we talked about financial relief and liquidity in the market towards the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
So recently, like if I'm not wrong, today only we got the revision of a reduced GST from the 28% slab.
Yeah.
How do you see that as an effect in the market? Especially for
I was expecting a question like this, honestly, because this is bound to happen. But I think the time is too early for me to comment on this, because I need to go through the full extent of this. I can make a generic statement for all that you'd care, but I don't think at least now is the right moment maybe about it. This is too early to talk about. Even with regard to the financial policies, by the way, whatever had been rolled out in the market, we've been talking a lot, but it's better that we first roll out the policies, see how they're operational, and then we talk about it, rather than having these political discussions about that this is not going to happen, that's not going to happen. I would prefer not to answer this question, rather than we can maybe have one off the screen kind of a discussion, but not really here.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Sir, good evening. Sir, myself Muskan, commerce student from Lucknow University. Sir,
Please
I
go ahead.
ask you, ownership experience cycle. Sir, what are importance in marketing sector?
What is the importance of ownership experience cycle? That's what you're asking, if I'm not mistaken. Is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when you're talking about the ownership and experience, so earlier, if you remember, if you think about it, let's say, your parents, maybe their parents, the grandparents, they would basically talk about a product, and they would talk about it as a product itself. So it's like basically me buying a car, and that was a car at the end of the day. Of course, there was an emotion, certain sense of emotion associated with it. But even the car company, if you talk about the automobile company, they never really bothered to sell that experience that was coming out of that car. So it was basically about ownership and ownership only. So the usage of the product resulted in the end of this ownership story. But right now the focus has moved more towards experience. So this is, I think, becoming important. So when you're selling a car today, it's not really about selling that automobile. It's not really about selling that car anymore. It's got more to do with the experience that is built around it. So you can sell all the features that you'd want right now. So if you are an automobile company, I think it has implications for you right now. Now is the time, because right now it's a difficult time to sell your cars, sell your automobiles, sell your vehicles. But Tesla is doing its job perfectly. Tesla is doing all that it requires right now. So of course that's Tesla, and that's not what we're going to talk about. But other companies, you talk about Maruti, for example, probably now is the time to reposition, or maybe not even reposition, to reiterate that message that, look, we are a customer friendly company, that we are here for you, and that experience that you have, the pride and ownership that you have, a pride in ownership when you have using our brand, I think is more than relevant. So that is the ownership aspect, the experience aspect I'm referring to. So this creates a kind of a cycle. Again, after the lockdown period is over, I can assure you we'll again go back to that ownership stage, because that's how we look upon it. If you buy a bag of salt, I'm pretty sure you're not looking for the experience out of using the salt. But when you're buying even an iPhone for that matter, you're not really looking for that ownership as such, but it's about the experience. But the moment this lockdown kind of gets over, again, you're basically forming kind of a vicious cycle, probably like this. The moment there's a recession, this thing automatically comes up. Okay, so it's already 8:05. Can I ask the administration maybe, the admin? So if there is no other... Oh yes, please go ahead.
I'm Shaunak.
Please,
I just wanted a suggestion on like how to market for startups right now in this period.
That's something that can discuss as a consultancy, maybe, as a session, maybe. How to market for startups depends on the kind of startup. That's point one. What kind of a startup are you referring to? Is it an, let's say, what is the right way? Is it a IT-based startup, or is something that's got to do with technology? So it depends on what kind of startup you're talking about.
It's like a new concept I've come up with, like a new kind of a video. So I'm trying to market that. Like it's like an entirely new concept.
Rishabh, I would love to answer the question honestly. If you permit me to tell you this very honestly, I would love to answer this question. But I don't think this is the best platform for me to speak about, because this will take me, let's say, more than half an hour to talk about. There's so many things to talk about: the product, the price, the distribution strategies. We'll talk about it.
Contact you.
Definitely. Okay, so the team.
Less than 30 seconds. So whatever. So the PPT was wonderful. So can you just tell us about that? Was that some kind of GIF that you were using in each slide?
Yeah, GIFs.
And so where do we get it from?
Online. It's all available. I did not build any GIFs. It's all online. So make the best use of Google. Google is there. It's like a savior for us. So wherever there is a problem, I always go to Google, and that's where all the answers are. Okay, then thank you very much, everyone, all the audience members.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful session.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, all of you, once again.
Thank you so much, sir.
Have a good day, all of you, and please do stay safe. Thank you.